Kia ora koutou, everyone. I'm here presenting for Denise today because she's lucky enough to be back in the US and Canada. This time she's with a study tour looking at high-performing and affordable medium-density housing. But last year, she spent 4.5 weeks in San Francisco, Toronto, New York, Vancouver, Seattle and Portland. And she was focusing on how communities are influencing and shaping their own neighbourhoods. So she was right in there in the depths about what communities are doing. So she met with a whole bunch of people, activists, politicians, funders, non-government organisations, all levels of government, and she got a range of perspectives and insights about what communities can do. She also over there met a man called Jim Deers, who's a real passionate advocate for community-led development, and through him he's been coming over here for the last year or so, and a few of you might have seen him in action. So she travelled with her 14-year-old son and she blogged as she went, and the blog website is on there if you want to hear more about this trip. So here's the lovely Denise. Just a little bit about her. She works as the Auckland convener for the Inspiring Communities Network, and I'd really encourage you to check out the website there. They've got a lot of information and resources to support community and neighbourhood-led development. She works with a wide range as a consultant with community groups, government. She's working for Beacon Pathway now. She's working in Christchurch, looking at how to build sustainable neighbourhoods there after the earthquakes. She lives across the road from Eden Park, so she's experienced a lot of change in her own neighbourhood in the last few years. And she also is really intentional about sustainability in her own life. I've known her for many years and she's always had chickens in her backyard. She's got her own beehive, makes her own honey, grows her own food. She shops locally as much as she can. I'm sure she'd have a cow in her backyard if she was allowed. And she had the room. So now I'm going to go into some of the creative examples and the sites that she saw when she was overseas last year. So it's not a great photo here, but the first example is in the middle of the high-rises is a street reclaiming effort in New York. It was supported by Mayor Bloomberg, and it was designed by a guy called Jan Gehl, who's a Danish architect who works to reorient cities towards people instead of cars, towards pedestrians and cyclists. So he creates little pause spaces like this, and they're places for what Jim Deers would say, create bumping spaces between people. So you can actually connect with people, take a breather from the really dehumanising effects of skyscrapers and traffic. You can have spaces where you can just contemplate and sit and take a breath. We're going to need more and more of these little oases in our cities, I think. And it's an interesting issue for Auckland to look at how we create these kinds of spaces. Here's a community-led effort around something similar. It's in a place called Dumbo, which is an acronym for Down Under the Manhattan Bridge Overpass in Brooklyn, New York. And basically a group of local business owners and residents just painted out 9 car parks. They didn't ask, they just did it in the spirit of forgiveness later. They just did it, and they self-manage, they self-organise, they've repainted this 3 times. They just pitch in and look after the space. Apparently it's really well patronised. You can't see it on the screen, but there's a white tent at the end. Someone's actually moved in, created a house there, made it their neighbourhood. They use the same planters as the City Hall does, but they're a lot more creative with their painting. And apparently the City Hall, you know, the local level of government, liked this so much that they wanted to connect it with their official city plaza, which is under the rail bridge. And that's how they discovered that it wasn't one of theirs, which took about 2 to 3 years apparently before they realised that. So this is Little Italy in New York. I've actually been here, and they quite often shut the streets off to cars. And every second shop here is an Italian restaurant, very competitive kind of business space. But by making it a place for people and pedestrians, it's really good for the bottom lines of businesses, but it's also good for a vibrant neighbourhood. Imagine if our Queen Street or Main Street Newmarket or Otahu or Ponsonby or Henderson shut off to cars like this. I think they'll be very different places. This is in Toronto, And in Ontario, they've put 41 pianos all around the central areas. They're painted by local artists and they're there day and night. Anyone can use them. It's totally uncontrolled what happens there. Apparently there's really little vandalism because people love them. And they're in all kinds of places. They're on ferries, they're on bridges, they're in outside markets and galleries. I've heard of similar things where people put table tennis tables, or, you know, we've probably, a lot of us have seen big chess squares. People can play, do things, interact with people they don't know. And they're really relatively simple and cheap and easy things to do to create neighbourhoods, and they have lots of great ripple effects. This is in Toronto, where the local residents asked for the zoning to be changed so that they could set up businesses from their own homes. But apparently allowing this to happen meant that it gentrified a lot less, because the local residents could afford to stay there because they could operate a business from their home. So you keep the mix of people in areas. And also it attracts a lot of people to that neighbourhood and supports the vibrancy, and people like to come and have a look. So there will be a lot of talk about gardening. I know Richard's following on. This is a community gardening collective in a Seattle neighbourhood, and they're just so powerful for people seeing the value of their own contribution, but also the power of being part of a group. And through efforts like this, they can also, or we can also really make a positive change in our own lives and our own families. We can feed our families good food that we grow ourselves. There's nothing better than that. This is what's called a sharing table, which is in the community right next to the community garden in the last slide. So this was built with the support of an organisation called the Pomegranate Centre. So that's an example of an organisation that seeks funding but is also contracted to go in and walk alongside communities to help them plan and to help them undertake specific projects that will help make their neighbourhoods more vibrant. So this sharing table, the kids wait there for the bus, the gardeners sit there and eat their lunch. There's a social housing district there, so you can see it's open facing to the houses. It's just a space for people to come and gather. And this final example, it's free water play in a park. The thing about it is that the local level of government worked with the local community to make it something that people loved. I'm sure that children had an input to that because it looks like a lot of fun. And I think there's a huge opportunity in Auckland for us to lift our game in the area of family-friendly, fun things to do all year round. So something like this attracts people from all around the region to come and have a play. So just a few themes from Denise from her trip. So the scale we're talking about is quite small scale. It's street level, block level. It's about people working together in a place. And communities quite often have all the knowledge and expertise they need to do their thing, but sometimes they need support from outsiders to walk alongside. The key message in here is just to get on and do things, try things. And when you start something, who knows where they lead? And hopefully today there'll be lots of ripples from this as well. Systems change as a result of showing what's possible. Power is often either shared between governments and communities, or it's ignored, where communities and residents just get on and try something and ask forgiveness later if they need to. So finally, obviously thriving neighbourhoods need the input of the people who live there. It's important to show the value of what's happening at local and regional scales. And not only can individuals create change by what we do, but obviously groups. And she's just ended with a quote here from Bill Mollison. I had to Google him, but he is, Wikipedia calls him the father of permaculture. He's an Australian. He set up the Permaculture Institute in 1978 in Australia. And he says, I can't save the world on my own. It will take at least 3 of us. So, kia ora, Bill. And thank you to Denise. She's a very busy lady, but she took the time to put this together. Thank you.